Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Diamond, and some box openers say it's new bass day. Well, it's new bass decade, maybe? I don't buy basses very often, and I've been considering this one for no shorter than 19 years. So today's kind of a review based on my first impressions, as this instrument arrived only last weekend, but also I'll be sharing with you the results of my meeting with the luthiers behind this instrument in Tokyo in 2003, January 7, 2003 to be precise, which is almost precisely 19 years ago. So the story is, I was living in Los Angeles. I met Ken Dapron from Yamaha Artist there. He connected me with the Director of Artist Guitars Division in Yamaha Japan, Shigenobu Miyake, and also the Assistant Manager of Guitar Design, Tsugitomo Goto. So Goto-san, I think, is now the Head of Quality Assurance. So Miyake and Goto-san, thank you for your time. They were very generous with me as a young, very interested six-string bass player back in January 2003, and I spent a day with them at a very critical time, a very interesting time, because John Patitucci had his TRB JP1 first edition out, and at that time the prototype for JP2 was being made. So I took along my Warwick six-string, my trusty bass of the time, and still today, my trusty six-string, and checked out both JP1 and JP2, the John Patitucci Signature Series by Yamaha. I guess I should also thank John Patitucci himself for inspiring me to start six-string bass back in the 90s, and the Warwick Thumb Bass neck through six-string is from 1991, which you'll be seeing today in the comparisons with the JP2 and the JP1. So I'm going to try and share my feedback from Goto-san and Miyake-san. And yeah, so John Patitucci, of course, it's exemplar musicians like himself, also Anthony Jackson, through teaming up with superb creators of instruments such as Federa in Anthony Jackson's case and Yamaha in John Patitucci's case, that we get the combination of their expertise and the luthiers' expertise. So yeah, so we can ride on those benefits. So I met with the two Yamaha luthiers in Shibuya, in the artist-related 21 section in Shibuya, which is a sort of region of Tokyo. And as I said, had the TRB JP1 and JP2 prototype for the JP2 in hand, along with my Warwick neck through. So the Warwick, which you can't quite see right now, is just as heavy. It's a beautiful piece of work, and I will still love it, even though it's been kind of slightly superseded this last week. So a different kind of instrument, and let's look at the differences and similarities, I guess, in some cases. Yeah, maybe fractionally. No, it's about the same weight. How heavy is it? Bloody heavy. So it's a beast. You just have to, yeah, look at Scott's bass lessons. He does an opening of this one. So I got the dark red. How could you not get the dark red? No, the yellow is cool as well. The wood, firstly. So Patitucci talks about this instrument on his YouTube video as well, and deliberately chooses woods that you know, throw back to the Fender design. So you've got maple, you've got alder, and ash. So there's kind of a wood sandwich there between the hardwood of maple and the softer ash and alder. So I asked the luthiers about that, and they said that's about sustaining characteristics. So that's why they do that. The interesting thing about the JP2 is how it's cut away, so you can kind of see the ash and alder in layers there. My first impression of this feature of the body back in 2003, I felt it looked beautiful, but also a very muscular look. I kind of, in my journal, I said it's a bit rhinoceros-like in its muscularity, I suppose you could say. Yeah, those are the body woods, and they tell me that they're over 2 years old when they're felled, which, anyway, I'm not a luthier, it doesn't sound very long. Baby trees, and seasoned in the Yamaha proprietary EMC moisture content reduction system, which you can look at online, until it receives about 8 to 9% of moisture content only. Unlike the Warwick, of course, that's one of the big differences. No workout today. That's unfinished. So I've been oiling this one for exactly 30 years. I've gotten a bit slack in the last decade or so, but you don't, of course, have to oil this. It's quite the opposite. The polyurethane finish, the Yamaha technicians said quite adamantly this is the best thing to do to a bass in terms of protecting it from the elements, and it protects the wood in a wide variety of environments and keeps it stable. It says the polyurethane creates a so-called calm sound. Lacquer is not chosen because it's sensitive to marks and scratches, and they said they don't use it on export models. Yeah, polyurethane is the best. And they said uncoated, like the Warwick here, they said it creates a wild sound. So they want a calm sound, which the polyurethane gives you. Just a note on that, actually, there's something that I've noticed by playing these two instruments the last week. I don't sweat very much, but the repository of grease for my hands on the polyurethane, on the body and particularly the neck, of course, I'm going to put it down before my arm falls off, is quite noticeable. And I'm finding I have to clean off the oils, not just with a microfiber cloth, but use water and light vinegar to strip away that oil left by my hands, which of course I've rubbed down my Warwick as well, but being porous, I suppose some of the finger oils go into the body, which is probably not a bad thing. Free beeswax. So that's one difference. I feel particularly, it feels great when it's clean, but when it's a bit oily, it feels a bit slippery. So keep it clean, they say. So we've talked about the wood and the wood coating. So next, the strings. The JP2 has a scale length of 35 inches, which is otherwise called extra long, 35 inches. Now the JP1 was 34, which is like the Warwick. So the scale length increase is one of the big differences of this instrument. And you might think, oh, that's not very much over the course of that far, 1 inch, but you will feel the difference, especially on the 6 string. So that's something like 889 millimeters is the 35-inch scale length. Also, in their wisdom, John Patitucci added 2 more frets. So it goes up to fret 26 there in the high register, which is just like the Warwick thumb bass, and was something that I was particularly looking for. when I was looking for a second instrument to maintain the register that I like to access and I compose for and I play. So 26 frets. The next big difference is string spacing. And once again, on paper it doesn't sound very much. So standard string spacing of the Fender 4-string, which I have over there, is 20 mil. Yamaha uses 18 or 19 mil string spacing for their 5-string basses. So, and 19 or 20 for their 4-string basses. So 20 is full, anything less is less than standard. So 19 mils on the JP basses, which is 1 mil further away than the Warwick. Again, you might not think that is very much, but of course it adds up once you have 6 strings, hence the massive size of that neck. It's just enormous. So that's by virtue of the string spacing. And the string spacing, of course, is not constant the whole way. That measurement is taken at the bridge. You find still a wider spacing at the nut, up there, than again on the Warwick. So when you're in the depths of the instrument, you'll find you'll need to cross strings with a sort of a bigger reach, so to speak. So John Patitucci plays, fortunately, the same string spacing as I was used to on the Warwick 6-string, which is an 030 diameter on the top C string, and then 045, 065, 085, 0.105 and 0.125 on the low B string. So it comes with the D'Addario strings, and more importantly, the nut is set up for those string gauges. If you are particular about playing different string gauges, then you should definitely indicate that if you were to order one of these beasts, because the nut is bone and it's going to be chiseled out to match the string spacing that you have. It needs to be, of course, a good fit. Now, I asked about the nut and I said, oh, you know, that's not adjustable. Yeah? By adjustable, I mean by string height, because you know, I've been spoilt by the nut on the Warwick, the brass one with those saddles which rotate. There's screw threads there, and you can change the string height at the nut, which I thought was pretty cool. And of course, the Japanese have a comeback for that, and it's kind of logical. The nut is one of the 3 most important contributors to tone on the instrument. And a threaded screw support for a string like that brass nut is lossy. And you can kind of see that when you look at the design. It's not like a solid bone nut like on the Yamaha. So they decide not to do that because it undermines the sound. So, okay, that's interesting. What are the other 2 important contributors to sound, I asked. And they said, well, the next one is, of course, the bridge. Big, solid, brass bridge there. And you might think that, well, that's just pretty. But actually, how it's made is the important part. So, of course, you can die cast aluminium shapes like that, or bronze, brass, whatever, alloys, or you can carve them. And so the important thing there is it's a carved bridge, which has better sustaining characteristics. So bridge is another super important part of the overall sound. So whatever bass you play, if you're thinking about improving the sustaining characteristics and tone, have a look at your bridge and see if it can be replaced. I think with my Fender 4-string, one of the best things I did, probably the best thing I did, was I ditched the standard Fender bridge for a badass, beautiful, solid bridge, and you know, matching color and all of that. So you can do that. So go for a solid bridge, like the solid brass one on the Yamaha, not a die-cast bridge for superior tone. So the third and last facet, which the Yamaha luthiers said were important to tone, were, surprise, surprise, the tuning posts. And there's double surprise, surprise for me, because, you know, I'm used to playing on all my other instruments, solid metal tuners, like the machine heads and the tuning posts. You know, these are solid things. And as soon as you go to tune the Yamaha, you kind of say, oh, it's such a solid instrument. And you go to feel those tuning posts, do they look like plastic? They're plastic or polycarbonate. And these posts are aluminium. They're not solid brass. Now the JP1 was. So you kind of think, well, they've taken a design step backwards. Why did they do that? Why did they replace the solid brass tuning posts if they say it's one of the 3 most important contributors to the tonal characteristics? And why do they put this cheap feeling plastic, you know, I guess it's just cosmetic, but, you know, why when those beautiful solid metal ones are on, you know, Warwicks and Fenders and everything else? Well, again, it's the Japanese. They've thought of everything. There is a reason for this compromise, and the compromise reason is balance. It's 6-string after all. So once you put 6 tuning posts and 6 pegs on the machine heads, you've got a shitload of weight hanging off the end. And I must say this is an exquisitely balanced instrument. Maybe slightly even better balanced than the Warwick. And it's despite the Warwick's beautiful curvature to the body, which I didn't mention as a comparison before, but it's arched out there. So it kind of feels like part of you when it's against your torso. But due to the balance of the Yamaha, you feel equally at home, actually. It doesn't feel quite so massive when it's around your body. Yeah, so they decided to sacrifice a couple of things there for the balance. The placement of the posts, John Patitucci likes a nice tight C string. So placing the C string post closest to the nut, as you can see it's been prioritized, gives a possibility for a nice high tension, not floppy sounding C string. And the remaining strings just fall away after that prioritized C string. I did ask, you know, why don't you have a tension bar? That's what they call them, just beyond the nut. And so why don't you have a tension bar? Because I saw the breaking angle of that B string is not that high, and wouldn't you get a tighter connection there if that was lowered a bit through a tension bar? Once again, this was the luthier's response, well thought out. They said, well, there's vibration, it happens here, and that harmonic and non-harmonic vibration contributes to the rich character of the sound. The residue vibration in the strings that resonates there is a good, worthy addition to the overall sound. It adds complexity in a good way. So the tension bar, they said, makes the sound too simple. So that's an interesting response. Goto-san did say, though, he was regretful about not patenting the 0 fret change of angle. So you might have seen offset nuts on more recent instruments than this, with a more distant low B string 0 fret or nut. And that's because if you've played 6-string or even 5-string and you play up the fretboard, you often get a sharp sounding B string sound. You know, the notes that you're fretting up there, 12th fret or above, you'll hear it go sharp. And that will sort of counteract that tendency of playing high on that thick B string. The frets are medium size nickel silver material. They're very positive feeling playing up and down the fretboard. And the luthiers, of course, reinforce the fact that this material should be dense, but slightly malleable. And of course, that makes the best kind of connection between the strings and the frets, which of course are spaced in equal temperament. One of the enhancements to JP2 model over JP1 also was sort of hiding around the back here, this lump right at the bottom, which I hadn't seen or played before. Kind of felt weird to start with, but then I got used to it. This is called a volute, and it's a sculpted shape where the headstock joins the neck. It's not really detectable because you don't sort of play beyond the sort of 0 fret sort of nut area, but it's there to add strength to the headstock, which is dealing with a whole lot of extra tension, especially in the new design. Also about strength, these 2 holes you can see at the bottom of the fingerboard. You can see little Allen key holes pointing out there. Of course, these are the truss rods, not 1 but 2. So Yamaha uses a double truss rod design here. They talked about how they put the truss rods in straight rather than bent. So basically there's a steel rod and a steel plate sort of welded together, and with the Allen key you rotate one to enact a bending across the length. So you can make it flex in a convex sort of counter warp direction, or to straighten it. So that's how you deal with necks that aren't straight. Not that a straight neck is of course necessary or even desirable. Who was it? Verdine White, right? Earth, Wind and Fire. I think his neck on his bass was like a bow, like bow and arrow, which of course, you get lots of dynamic range out of. Action. So Patitucci likes a high string tension and a high action. Now, he plays double bass and he's got bigger hands than me. But I also like a high action. I find that it affords huge dynamic range. With the added scale length and string spacing here, I must admit it's a bit of a workout. So though it's more manageable than I expected, this last week, I'm having to work harder, but the results, the payoff is there waiting around the corner. So I think over time I will get used to the extra workout, especially from the left hand. But yeah, it's massive. Then there's the pickups. The electronics on the JP models, both JP1 and JP2, are active systems, of course. Double coil pickups, so they're resistant to noise and hum, high output. The difference between JP1 and JP2 is a stacked configuration of bobbins on the JP1 with a side-by-side configuration on JP2. The luthiers went to great detail about pickup configuration and how it's wired up. The 9-volt panel on the back for the battery is very easily accessed and easy to get your battery in and out. I don't know about life yet because I've just had it for a week, so no comment on that one. The controls for the pickups, you've got volume here, sort of panning with a center detent for the neck and bridge pickups, and high, middle and low with center detents with the small knobs at the bottom. They all feel very good quality, yeah, a lot of response. Of course, always unplug your cable from the jack, otherwise you'll be running the battery down quickly. The jack is beautiful actually, and it feels very positive plugging in and plugging out of this. feels like a very solid socket. So really grips the plug very well. So the electronics was something that Patitucci played around with and changed significantly between JP1 and JP2. JP1 had this Active 5 control system with a whole range of possibilities built into it that sort of favored either slapping or solo and finger style playing, or just flat options with sort of user adjustable trim pots inside the back cavity of the instrument. What Patitucci says he found after a while was he just ended up using the same settings, the ones he favoured best. So he ended up just sort of locking those in with JP2. Oh, another difference about JP1 and JP2, JP1 had a recessed input socket on the instrument, which in my notes from the experiments on the day with the prototype of JP2, I actually preferred the recessed socket on JP1, but I use a right-angled jack for JP2 and that seems to work just fine. Something else I'd like to share about the access of the 26 fret fingerboard. The cutaways in the body are actually beautifully done, and if anything, access on the 26th fret is even better on this larger scale length instrument than on the 34-inch Warwick. So it's actually very playable up there, which I was pleased to discover. So in summary, I've just started playing with the JP2 Yamaha 6-string, and first impressions are, my goodness, what a beast. But then you start playing around the fretboard and you find all this range is actually realistically accessible. And the C string just sings with that extra tension. You've got that kind of clack that the frets give you as you go up the C string into the second octave. And what's best of all is probably you've got the tightest low B string on the market. Because of the extra scale length, there's an extra tension that you can afford onto the low B, so it's not floppy. You can play dynamically and rhythmically on the low B, and it really has a strength that I think is second to none. You just have to listen to John Patitucci play across the instrument, I suppose. There's things definitely to get used to, namely the wider string spacing, and the 19 mils and the 35-inch scale length, just the weight of the instrument despite its great balance. So I've set it up with a Duo strap Neo. Damien Erskine endorses this, as does Patitucci himself. You'll probably find that online. I'm still messing around with it. I think I'm going to get some strap locks and even drill in the back of the instrument and make one of these secure there rather than with the tensioning system that is currently on the back. By virtue of the balance of the instrument, it actually is not necessary to get two straps on, but I wanted to try it out. So it's no more necessary than for the Warwick, which, as I said, is the same weight. But it's a kind of a nice feeling to have the two straps on. It just takes a little bit of the pressure off the left shoulder and distributes it to the right, which isn't a bad thing, because sharing is caring. So I'll probably do a video of me playing this instrument, or maybe I won't bother. You can just go off and watch John Patitucci himself, or any of the number of other players. I saw Dave Carpenter live before he died, living in Los Angeles, playing this instrument, or might have been the JP1, but no less. He's a monster player and it's a monster bass, and that's a wonderful combination. So thanks for watching my little review. Comments, blah, 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 bell, whatever. And you have yourself a Merry Christmas. I certainly will. Thanks, Mum, for the Christmas present. Bye.